I was blessed to broadcast over 25% of all games ever played by the University of Alabama. People always ask me, what's your favorite call? And then some people say, what's your most memorable call? And two totally different questions. That was when I hit personal rock bottom.
Beat Everyone is brought to you by Broadway Joe's Fantasy Sports, inspired by football legend Joe Namath. Embrace the thrill of daily fantasy sports like never before in a new app coming soon. Welcome back to Beat Everyone. I am Ben Flanagan. I'm joined by AL.com's Michael Casagrande, and we're sitting here for the Golden Age, and we're with none other than Eli Gold, the longtime voice of the Crimson Tide. And Eli, as the voice of arguably, or inarguably, really, the greatest college football program of all time for so many years, you're a big part of history, and that history and college football history. And we want to know not only what it's like to make history yourself in the booth, but to the people who are there in the room for the biggest moments. They're going to remember these things for the rest of their lives, and I know that you're going to have a lot to say about that.
Well, it's been an honor to be with arguably the best program in its heyday, without a doubt. But what I do is very simple. I always tell people I'm a professional describer. I'm a professional describer. I see something and I have a God-given ability to describe it as it happens. So, I didn't make the plays. I didn't do anything. I've just been sitting there on my butt, but I've been describing as the conduit between the team and the fan. I'm the voice that they have heard, and I've been blessed for, almost 40 years to be able to bring Crimson Tide sports to the fan base.
Do you ever get butterflies before a big game?
Not really. I don't think it's butterflies. I have high hopes that the team can win. I don't like to do games where Bama loses. It's part of the business, certainly. You're not going to win every single game. But no, butterflies I don't yet, because I think, I don't know why, it's never happened. But I certainly have a heightened awareness of how important a national title game or an SEC championship game is versus something else, the week 2 game against,
Don't say Western Kentucky.
No.
Don't do it.
No, I'm tempted, against Middle Tennessee or whomever.
Anyway, yeah.
But if you don't beat the Western Kentuckys, and if you don't beat the Middle Tennessees, and if you don't beat schools of that ilk, you're not going to get to the national championship game. So they really are. I mean, the most important game, I sound like a coach, but it's the truth. The most important game is the next one, because if I screw up on the air against Middle Tennessee or whomever, I've still screwed up, and I'm going to hear about it. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. So to me, every single game is equally as important.
So do you feel a responsibility as somebody who is recording and documenting this history? Because before you got to Alabama, there was already decades of amazing history in terms of college football and where Alabama fit into that picture. So you have that heightened awareness coming in. But as you're starting to call championship games, talk about that. I mean, what is that heightened awareness in the sense of okay, it's 1992, 93. We're here now at the biggest possible stage.
Right.
Does it up your game at all?
Yeah.
And that responsibility to get it right?
I know how big it is. Yeah. I've always described it as holding a piece of rare crystal, this job. It was like holding a piece of rare crystal, and you want to make sure you don't drop it and have it go to smithereens on the floor beneath you. So I know how vital the job is, how much it means to people. So yes, I'm always aware of that. I am always aware of what I'm saying, how I say it. It's something that's always on your mind. but you still have to be yourself. You still got to go out and describe what you see, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's what I've done.
Eli, what's the best setting for a big game? The best place, the best stadium, the best place that is...
Well, obviously, I'm partial to Bryant-Denny.
Outside of Bryant-Denny.
Nice soft shoe there.
Yeah.
The Rose Bowl was pretty cool. I would love to have done this would be sacrilege to say, I would love to have done a pinstripe bowl game. Being a New York Yankees fan, I'd love to have done a game at Yankee Stadium, but that didn't happen. But, realistically, the games almost transcend the venue. It doesn't matter if it was Alabama, Texas for the national title in Pasadena, in New Orleans, in Atlanta, in Miami Beach Gardens.
Even Shreveport?
I've done a lot of games in Shreveport.
You hesitated.
If you're playing for the national championship, though,
yeah, something weird's happened, but yeah.
Yeah, right. But if you're playing for a national title, it doesn't matter where it is. The event is bigger than the venue. It really is.
That's fair.
Yeah, and you've got to be conscious of the fact that, like, these calls are going to live forever.
Yes, I know that.
They're going to be in the Bryant Museum. They're going to be on, ESPN and CBS when they're looking back on these big games.
Sure.
You mentioned butterflies earlier and how, you don't necessarily have those because you're a professional. You've prepared. You've done this before.
Right.
But I guess in your mind as you're calling that, has there ever been a game where, like, as soon as you've made a call or you've been at a game where you thought, okay, I'm going to hear that for the rest of my life, repeated back to me somehow?
Yeah. And there's also been times where I've screwed up and I've turned around to our engineer producer, Tom Stipe, and I said, please make sure that never gets to the light of day again. And they will miraculously lose the cut or it'll get erased or something like that. There haven't been many of those, but there have been some. I mean, I'm human. I screw up. I have given a touchdown to the wrong person. Not often, thank God, but it's happened. And I will turn around and Tom won't even let me say anything, obviously. He'll just say, in my ear, he'll say, I got you. And, that happens. But no, I am very, very cognizant of that. I remember before the kick in the Tennessee game that Terrence Cody blocked, we were on a commercial break. And I was just sitting there. And I don't talk to myself. That sounds odd, but I was kind of talking to myself in my brain. And I said, all right, this cut's going to live on forever. Be careful what you say. I just I reinforced that to myself. And thankfully that play was okay. So yeah, I'm aware. I am always aware.
What are you scared you're going to do? Like let an F-bomb fly or something?
No, not
like,
that.
What's the worst that could happen, right?
I totally screw it up,
What's screwing it up to you?
Oh, from my angle of where I was watching, did the ball go through or not? I might have said, and it's wide right. Well, son of a gun, I find out it just was inside the right upright. You don't want that to happen. A lot of things that could go wrong. So no, I am, and at times, I'll be very honest, at times I was deliberately a half second behind the play.
It's not a visual, like.
It's just because I was making darn sure the snap is there, the spot is down. Well, that happened, maybe a quarter of a second earlier, but I gave myself enough time to abort what I was saying and saying something different if necessary.
Well, you have that luxury anyway, because the people listening, they can't see it, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Whatever you give them is what they get.
Exactly. And even on television, nothing is live. Everybody's on a delay nowadays. So nothing is live anymore. And so yeah, I'm, sometimes I'll be uber careful in a situation. But again, many times you just don't know when a big play is coming. Who could have imagined, Tua hitting Devonta for the national title? You just, it's a big play, but you just got to go with it and describe it as you see it. People always ask me, what's your favorite call? And then some people say, what's your most memorable call? And two totally different questions. Maybe the Tua to Devonta was my favorite. One of my most memorable calls, and as far from a favorite as you're going to get, was the kick six at Jerry. Now, that sure as heck wasn't a favorite for an Alabama guy, but it was hugely memorable. I'll never forget it. And so it depends on how the question is phrased oftentimes as to whether it's your favorite or most memorable. And, in NASCAR, I was on the air. I was my voice when Dale Earnhardt got killed. Sure as hell not a favorite. I mean, I love Dale. We were good friends. That was a terrible, terrible. Memorable, at the top of the list. Favorable and favorite, as far down as you can get because of what it was. So a lot of times my answer depends on how the question is phrased. You got to remember, guys, I was blessed to broadcast over 25% of all games ever played by the University of Alabama. Over 25% of every game that they've ever played. And that's because, so many times we had, 15-game seasons and what have you. And that's how that number got past John Forney and his 30 years.
Hey, so Eli, you brought this up. I mean, I'm not mad at you, and I'm sure other people aren't either, but you mentioned the kick six, right? So the call that does get played over and over is obviously Rod Bramlett's call.
Rod,
right,
sure.
Exactly. And it's because Auburn won the game.
Yeah.
But people, I think, forget, even because they want to forget it ever happened, but the fact that Eli Gold also called that too on the Alabama broadcast.
As did Vern Lundquist on CBS.
Yes. What do you remember about that play and that call?
What I remember about the play is that, I had a great view, and I quickly looked to my left, as that was the direction that he was running, and I saw that there was nobody back there in Alabama colors to try and stop him. And I said in the course of the play-by-play, and there's nobody back for the Tide. But, I didn't know exactly what I said. I called it, and I called it satisfactorily, but I didn't remember what I said. We didn't play that on the postgame show because it was not an Alabama highlight by any stretch of the imagination. And I was kind of disappointed the way things finished. We get into the car to drive back to Birmingham, and I didn't even put the radio on. I'd had enough noise, and I just didn't want to hear all the talk. The next morning, I get up like at 3:30 in the morning to catch a flight to Las Vegas. This is the Sunday morning, the day after the kick six. I was going out to do NASCAR's awards week. The banquet was out there. I had talk shows out there and so on. So I get on the nonstop Southwest flight, and I'm flying to Vegas, and I had scant little sleep. So I fell asleep. Woke up somewhere over middle America, and I'm lying there in the chair with my head back, and I'm saying, well, I probably need to try and find the cut. I'd like to hear what I said. I knew I didn't screw up, but I wanted to hear what I said. And of course, there's Wi-Fi on the airplane, so I took out my phone and I signed on to the Wi-Fi, and somebody had compiled, I don't know who it was, but they had compiled like 5 different versions of the play. My call, Rod's call, Vern Lundquist's call on CBS, a Russian call, and a Japanese call. It was funny, but I listened. And what I'm getting at here is all 3 of us, myself, Rod, and Vern, did a great call for our respective audiences. Vern, as straight down the middle as you could humanly be, for every listener from Maine to Maui and anywhere in between. who had no rooting interest necessarily were just watching a good SEC game. Rod was urging him down the field. Get down there, 50, 40, 30. They're not going to stop him, this. And exactly what the Auburn audience wanted to hear. And my call was who was trying to tackle him. And, and this one missed, and the tight end missed, and he's on the near sideline, and there's nobody back for Alabama. It was a factual, clear-cut call suited for our listeners. So we all did a perfect job. The calls were totally different. Obviously, Vern being on TV, he was just putting a caption on the picture. Rod was saying what he was saying, I was saying what, and we all did a perfect job for our respective audience. But, it was disappointing, certainly. But, I just called it like I saw it. And that was it.
I mean, with all due respect, no kick six call is suited for Alabama fans. I mean, if we're being
certainly,
totally honest,
certainly.
yeah.
But if you were going to call it the way it, Brian Vogler tried, Vogler can't get him. Such whatever it was.
You're giving him flashbacks.
I remember Eli. I
He's
get it.
getting the shakes over
Yeah,
here.
it's just one of those things. But I called it well as it could be called for the Alabama audience.
We're going to take a break on that note,
Okay.
so I can have some time to decompress. But we're going to come back and we're going to talk about how Eli was part of history on Beat Everyone. This is the Golden Age. We'll be back. We're back here on Beat Everyone. It's the Golden Age, sitting here with Eli Gold, Ben Flanagan, and Michael Casagrande. Eli, against my better judgment, I've been asked by producers here to keep asking you about losses, Alabama losses. And I'm just curious, I mean, they're about, that's part of the history too, right? And
Sure.
Alabama has been in some historic games where they've been on the wrong end of it. How do you tell that story?
Just the way it unfolds. I don't embellish. I don't downplay. I just tell the story as it unfolds. The losses are not nearly as energetically told as a big win is. But, the Alabama fans, and for that matter, the Auburn fans, and intense fans of anybody in the SEC or for wherever you look, these people know their football. They are, chances are, watching the game on television, if not there at the stadium. You can't lie. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I said, there are only two things we have in this business: your ability and your credibility. And if you lose either one of those, you're really out of business. I remember when Alabama lost 35-0 down in Florida. They still haven't tackled Eric Rett. He's still running somewhere. And, I couldn't say, man, did Bama play themselves a heck of a game today? But, you should have seen the other guys. Bama didn't play a heck of a game. I don't have to elaborate on a 35-0 score. The fans know. So all I had to do was describe what happened. For the record, the Tide then didn't lose for the next 2 years after that loss at Gainesville, but I digress. The bottom line is you call it the way you see it. That's what I do. As I said earlier, I'm a professional describer. And, sometimes you're describing something that's pleasant, sometimes not. But you just got to, go with the flow. That's what I'm trained to do.
I remember talking to you under the stadium in Tampa after
I remember
the Clemson game,
yes.
the Renfro touchdown that won the game. And I remember asking you and I wrote a story about it. What was it like being in that booth? Because it was clearly the epicenter of the college football universe. Everyone's watching, and then the moment happens that is not what you were hoping to see, and everyone listening were hoping to hear. So, yeah, and I think you described it well.
Yeah, it was just, you call what you see. Did I want to see Hunter Renfro make the catch? No. But he did. Game over. Clemson wins the title. But no, you just have to, every single game is not going to go your way. You kind of wish it did, but that's not realistic. That's not real life. But I do remember running into you in the bowels of the stadium that night, and we discussed that. And it was, you call it the way you see it.
Yeah, I remember I was coming from the locker room, probably the most uncomfortable locker room I've ever been a part of, having to walk into. And I've covered championship games where Alabama has lost, and it's been unpleasant. The Rose Bowl was probably this last year was probably the second most uncomfortable, but that, not to bring up bad times for the Bama folks, but that being in that locker room, it was the most visceral feeling of the raw, open nerve of a game that ended as abruptly as it did.
Yeah, I understand that.
Eli, I'm trying to think of the Alabama losses. It's kind of hard because there's so few and far between, but the LSU rivalry has just been, it's been amazing. The way it blossomed, especially during the Saban era.
Yeah.
There were just some classics. Alabama obviously won some and lost some. You think about game of the century, right?
Sure.
In 2011. That was there have been subsequent big games, but that atmosphere was one I'll never forget.
Well, number one against number two. SEC College Game Day was there on ESPN. They started setting up on Tuesday. I mean, it was
beautiful day.
It was the whole thing was perfect. Yeah, other than the 9-6 final or whatever it was.
Yeah,
9-6. It was just it happens. What are you going to do? You just have to go with it and write it in your case, or talk about it in my case, to the best of one's ability. And that's what we're trained for. That's what we're trained to do. And, you relay the feeling of the day, not just the results, but how it got there and what it felt like, and the despair and the quiet in the stadium and this and that, except for the pocket of LSU fans in the corner of the end zone. There's lots to describe, and that's what I did.
And that's what I tell people, is that we're undefeated. We're not responsible for anything that happens on the field.
Exactly.
You can't blame us. We're just there to tell you, but we're just the messenger. So
exactly.
As a follow-up to that, another LSU game that had a pretty similar atmosphere was 2019, the Joe Burrow game. Game Day is in town. SEC Nation is in town. The president at that time was in town. What do you remember about that? Anything in particular?
No, just another game against LSU.
Yeah.
I don't, I remember the game. I remember all that took place, but no, the things that I remember is the weird stuff, coming down the elevator in one of the years, I forget, we were in the hotel where the team was staying, and we get into the elevator, and my wife and I and our daughter, and there's a lady, a mother, and her young son, and I'm wearing an Alabama shirt, and they're wearing LSU gear, and the kid is standing right next to me, and I'm 6'2.5", and he's, a young boy, and he looks up at me, and he said, I don't know these people from Adam. He looks up at me in the elevator, and he goes, "Tiger bait, tiger bait, tiger bait." Well, what are you going to say? You're a 60-year-old guy. You're not going to get into an argument with a little shrimpy kid who's, 12 years old or whatever. So I just kind of looked at him and didn't even acknowledge him.
Just pet him on the head.
No, I didn't even acknowledge him. And we go out and play the game. Bama wins at Baton Rouge. Come home. Go to bed in the hotel, wake up the next morning to head back to Birmingham. And what are the odds? But in the elevator, we obviously not pre-planned. Whenever we got up and got dressed and showered and packed and
Did you do it?
Here's the mother, and there's a little kid. And he looked at me, and the mother looked at me, and I looked down at the little kid. And you know what I said? Not a darn thing. He was waiting for me to say something. But I felt that by not saying something and having him get that feeling in his stomach that this guy's going to say something that embarrass me. It would be better off not saying anything and let him think about it all the way down from the 30th floor to the lobby. I never said a word to him. But, that's the kind of stuff that I remember. But, but the games themselves, yeah, they were magnificent. Alabama, LSU, and I guess if I'm not mistaken, and I have to look now, it's been a few years, but if I'm not mistaken, Alabama is the winningest team in the history of Tiger Stadium other than LSU. I don't believe anybody has won more games in Baton Rouge than has Alabama over the years than have the LSU Tigers. Kind of like the year Bama played all those games in Dallas. They won more games than the Cowboys did,
You're a better man than I would have let the kid have it, to be honest. But had you done that, we probably would have been writing about you in the newspaper.
Yeah, I mean, how can you? Yeah, that's exactly right. A guy in his 60s can't,
shouts down
can't
child.
berate a 10-year-old kid.
What a punk.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like the weird stories. What other weird moments come to mind?
I don't know.
We could do a whole episode on the weird moments of.
There are many. A lot of them are in my book, From Peanuts to the Press Box.
There you go.
Available at better bookstores everywhere, and some lousy bookstores also. But yeah, no, there have been some funny things over the years, but it's I've had a wonderful, wonderful career. I really have.
Eli, in terms of the historical context of this, I know that fans probably repeat calls to you and tell you how much they enjoy what you've done over the years. What does it mean to you that your voice and the job that you've done has so much meaning to fans?
Well, it means a lot, but I also have to remember, it's not Eli Gold. They are Alabama fans. I was the custodian of the job of relaying what happened on the field to this magnificent fan base. They're not so much Eli Gold fans as they're fans of Alabama and fans of the guy who brought them all this, in the most part, great news. So, I'm honored. I'm thrilled. People have been so wonderful ever since I was shown the exit. People have been contacting me. They've seen me in the store. They come up to me, want to, tell me how much they hate that I'm not going to be back and this and that and the other. And I thank them all profusely. But it's not Eli Gold. It's the Crimson Tide. I happen to be the guy who was charged with bringing all that action to them.
You're too close to it, okay? Because I can tell you with a lot of confidence that it is Eli Gold. And you saw the outpouring of support that you've gotten over the last several months. You hadn't been doing this for 36, years and 4 decades for nothing, right? So I can be, one person to tell you that that's not the case.
Well, let me be a second one, because I feel like you've probably narrated a lot of people's greatest memories of their lives, and in a sense that I remember meeting up with you. I was on one of my first dates with my now wife. You were calling the Birmingham Bulls game,
right? And
I saw you up. And I said, "Oh, there's Eli. Let me go introduce you to Eli Gold." So I introduced you too, and quick chat, and we walked away. And my then girlfriend was so blown away that she just met Eli Gold, and she called her dad. I just met Eli Gold. It's the coolest thing, And now
nice.
We're married, and I think I owe you because. Without that moment,
I didn't have anything to do with it, but no, it's just, I have been blessed. I mean, I have been blessed. I owe it all to Tommy Limbaugh for hiring me and for helping me stay around. And of course, I owe it to the coaches and the players. If Alabama was 0-12 every year or 0-11, Eli would have been nothing. I would have had nothing to describe. As it is, I've been to 10 national title games or whatever, and so on. I mean, that's stuff you can't even draw up, Let
me ask you about the contrast of what we've been talking about, right? Like making history, being part of the biggest moments in the history of Alabama football. What is the antithesis of that for you? whether it's, if you can, Alabama, but like, what's the crappiest game that you've ever like been to, whether it's like a bowl or it's been a bad season or whatever? Was there ever just like a nightmare scenario?
The only nightmare scenario, and it had nothing to do with an actual broadcast. It has to do with this lifestyle that we live. There have been years where I've been on the road 220 nights out of 365. When I was doing baseball, and I was doing hockey, and I was doing NASCAR, and I was doing football, I was always on the road. And I had missed an event for my daughter, who was very young at the time. She was taking dance classes, and I missed a recital. And I just felt like heck. So I said to her, the next recital, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. And it was on this Sunday, whatever it was, in June, whatever year. But she was, a young girl. She's 34 now. She was probably 12 or something. I don't know. And everybody knew that I had sworn off taking the red eye, the overnight flight from the West Coast to the East Coast. I just didn't like them. I hated them. I'd rather lose Sunday by traveling than get a Sunday back by taking the red eye and leaving the West Coast at midnight and getting home at 6 a.m. It just wrecked me. But I said, I'm going to do this. I said, Elise, I will be there tomorrow. She was going to be dancing at the Alabama Theater on this little recital. I said, I've got the red eye. I was in Portland, Oregon, doing a NASCAR truck race. I was flying Portland to Salt Lake City, to Atlanta, to Birmingham. So it was a double connect, but that was the only way I could get back to be here for her recital. And the race is over in Portland, and I hustle to the airport, get on the plane. We take off, land in Salt Lake City. I hustle to the gate, and the flight is delayed. And the flight is delayed some more. And the flight is finally canceled. The red eye to Atlanta was finally canceled. So they get me in the days when airlines would provide hotel rooms and so on. They got me a hotel room at the Salt Lake airport, and I checked in, and I'm sitting on the edge of the bed. It was a Marriott Courtyard hotel, and I'm sitting at the edge of the bed, and I had tears coming out of my eyes. I don't mind admitting it. I had to call home and say, listen, I'm not going to make it for the dance recital. And at that point, the truck race had that amount of importance. Nothing was important except me not being able to get to that recital the next day. And I called again first thing Sunday morning and talked directly to Elise. She was asleep the night before. And I told her what was happening, and she said, that's okay, Daddy. And she tried to make it sound like it was no big deal. Well, Claudette, my wife, went with the video camera and videotaped the whole presentation. I then flew home. I don't know, it was probably 2, 3 o'clock when I finally walked in the house here in Alabama. And I put my suitcase down, and I went to the sofa with Elise and Claudette, and we watched the entire videotape. And, I told her how well she had done and this, that, and the other. But when I was sitting on that bed in the hotel in Salt Lake City, I was crying. Honest to God, I felt so bad for having to miss that dance recital that I said, why am I doing this? Why can't I should just get a job where I don't have to travel. I can stay home. I can see these events. I can not miss stuff anymore. And, I got over it, and they got over it, and we all talked. And, thankfully, I never gave it up. But that was the bottom. That was when I hit personal rock bottom. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. I've never had that kind of a problem in my life. My only problem was that day missing the dance recital that I had so heartily promised her I would never miss. And that one bothered me. That one got to me, but we've recovered. We've moved on, but there are certain things like that you never forget.
Certain things bigger than sports and a job, right?
Yes,
yeah,
family
absolutely.
is number one. And I'll tell you, if ever you wonder how much your spouse loves you and how much your child loves you, get sick like I did. Get cancer. Watch them advocate for you. Watch what they do for you. Watch how difficult it is for the caregiver to turn their lives over to you to make you better. I always knew, Claudette and I have been married 47 years. I've known that we love each other. But I'll tell you, man, never was it more in focus than I was lying in the hospital room here in Birmingham, fighting for my life. Family must come first.
Thank you for sharing that, Eli. I appreciate that. And we're going to end it on that note. But this has been awesome. Thank you for sharing.
And we'll be smiling next week.
But your perspective on, making so much history. So, we appreciate it. And we're going to learn more about it really soon. I know.
All right.
If you have a question for Eli, please leave us a voicemail at 205-523-4809. Subscribe to Beat Everyone on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And for Michael Casagrande and Eli Gold, I'm Ben Flanagan. Thank you so much.
Beat Everyone is brought to you by Broadway Joe's Fantasy Sports, inspired by football legend Joe Namath. Embrace the thrill of daily fantasy sports like never before in a new app coming soon.